Hello everybody, welcome to my new video. I haven't recorded for a while. I am just sat in my bedroom at the moment recording the audio to go over the top, and I have my dog sat next to me, so if you can hear any tail wagging or any funny noises, it's probably her. So yesterday afternoon I finished this portrait that I've been working on for the past week or so, and I recorded the whole process, so I thought I might as well share it and share some thoughts that I had while I was creating it, because I haven't done a graphite portrait in a long time. I needed to order all new art supplies because my art supplies are still in a container box in England, and if you didn't know, I moved to Italy, how long ago was it now? Like a year and a half ago, 2 summers ago. So it'll be coming up to 2 years this summer. And all of my art supplies, all of my artwork are in a container in England, and I have yet to bring them over. So I have to keep buying everything new. But these graphite pencils that I'm using, or I did use for this portrait, I have used before, and I use them for some of my favourite graphite portraits that I've ever done, so I repurchased the same ones, and they are the Caran d'Ache graphite pencils, and they're really soft. They don't have any hard bits in them, and I remember just having a very pleasurable experience with them last time, so I repurchased those. And I start off by just getting the outline done, and I think I'm just using the 2H pencil here, and I'm trying to mark out where all of the darkest areas are and where all the brightest areas are. So when I go in with all the pencils, I've kind of made myself like a little map. I know exactly where to put everything, kind of like a paint by numbers. I did most of that off screen before I started recording, and then I'm just going in with a 2H pencil, refining and making sure that I've got all of the details in the right place. The next thing that I usually do with all portraits, and this is pencil portraits, colour pencil portraits, or paint, I like to have all of my dark areas marked out first. So for this, because with the graphite pencils that I was using, the darkest one was a 9B pencil, and for me 9B isn't black enough. So graphite pencils, if you're not familiar, they come in shades that range between B and H, and H, the higher the number is the lighter the colour, and the higher number of B is the darker. So B stands for black, H stands for hard, because the pencils get harder and harder as you go up in numbers. But a 9B is the darkest that I have in the B class of pencils, and that wasn't black enough. So I used Caran d'Ache Luminance pencil, which is a colour pencil in black, to mark out all of the darkest areas first. And I find this just really helpful. It helps me see where everything is, whereas before, when I have everything just sort of outlined in a really light pencil, it's not very clear on my eyes, like to see where the balance of the colours are. And also when I'm going in with more medium tones and lighter tones, it's easier to sort of see how dark and how light to go when you've got something very dark to compare what you're laying down next to. Did that make sense? So my original plan was just to use the graphite pencils and this black pencil. So the graphite pencils, I got a more sort of restrained selection of them. I didn't get by the whole selection because they are actually quite expensive, the Caran d'Ache ones. I got 2H, HB, 3B, 5B, 7B and 9B. And I think that's enough, unless you're really serious about only using exactly the right pencil for the exact right shade and not blending them together to create in between tones. Or if you're working on something very big, then you might need all of them, but for this it's only A4, or it's only a small one, so I just got the limited set, and I found that that was perfect. That was enough. I didn't need any more. You will see that the lighting keeps changing, which is not ideal. I'm mostly using natural light, so I now work on a drafting table, which is a table that you can tilt. You can lay it flat and you can tilt it and you can move it up and down, which is really handy for me, because before I was working just on a flat surface and I'd have to bend over a lot and it started hurting. So when I moved into this new house that I'm in now, I bought a drafting table, so it's tilted. and it's up against a window at the moment, so I'm mostly using the light from the window to light the working area. I do have another light, so I'm still figuring out the lighting, so it is pretty weird throughout the video, so I apologise for the lighting. I'm going in with the graphite pencils now, and I decided to work from the top left hand corner and sort of move from the top left to the top right and then down in a motion like that, just to prevent any smudging, or prevent as much smudging as possible. So I hadn't decided what to do with the background yet, so I'm just keeping that clean, and I am using a little, are they called a tortillon, something like that, for smudging. But at some point throughout the video I found my little pencil smudger chewed up on the floor, so I think my dog might have done that, and I did eventually switch over to using cotton buds, which I actually prefer. I like to use cotton buds, cotton pads and tissue, depending on what the size of the area is that I'm trying to blend. They are my blending tools of preference, but I got this tortillon, I'm going to call it tortillon. It doesn't sound right, but anyway, I got that as part of a little set that I got for Christmas, so I thought I might as well use it, but it didn't last very long. So in the peripheral you can see a few items on the left and the right hand side. So on the left hand side, I actually use my iPad a lot at the moment as a display screen for my reference photos. So you might see in certain shots that my iPad sort of sneaking in on the left hand side. I used to use my phone to display the reference, and sometimes I would print the image out and have that, but I usually have the reference image displayed somewhere on the left hand side. But for this one in particular, I used my iPad. And then on the right hand side at the moment there is a little blue cup, and I use that for my sharpener, and then I usually have my phone underneath there, so if I'm listening to a podcast or watching a video or listening to an audiobook, I can control that, and that's easily reachable. And then underneath is the tin that the pencils came in, so I'm using that to prop everything up, so everything is easy to reach and I don't have to move very often. But what I have done maybe a week ago, just as I was starting this portrait, is I have this desk pushed up against the window, and then I have a smaller desk on the right hand side, sort of creating an L shape where I keep other pencils, all my smudging tools, my laptop, charging cables, a little charging pack for my camera, my drink, and that is so handy to have. So if you're left-handed, probably be best having it on the left-hand side, but I'm right-handed, so I put all that other stuff on a separate table on the right-hand side, and I find that is very helpful, especially when working on a slanted desk, because I can't put a drink on a slanted desk. I have seen online that you can get cup holders, so you can clip your cup, like a cup holder, to your desk so you can put your drink in it. And I was thinking about getting a couple of those, one for my actual drink and then another one for a cup for my pencil shavings. So I might do that in future. I think that would be an even better solution to propping it up on the table, because I would really like to have as much of the surface clear as possible. What I was listening to throughout this, I was listening to an audiobook called Dear John, which I remember seeing the film for when I was a teenager, but I didn't realise it was a book, and it was written by the same author that did The Notebook. I found that on Goodreads when I first started drawing this portrait, so I was listening to that, and I also started rewatching some of the old Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial, with all this talk about what's going on with Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. It just reminded me of that for some reason, so I started rewatching it, and there's so much footage, so that was an easy thing to have on for this portrait. I haven't actually looked to see how long it took me to complete. You need something that's really long and like not too entertaining that you have to watch it. Just something that you can listen to that lasts a long time in the background is ideal for me. So I didn't actually realise until I imported the footage yesterday onto my laptop that because of the camera angle, it's distorted the image slightly and it makes the face look shorter and the snout look shorter. So if you're looking at it now thinking, oh, it looks quite different to the thumbnail image, that's why. It's because of the tilted angle of the table, and that I've got the camera on the top of the table, but the arm's not long enough for it to be hanging over and like parallel to the table, so it's at a slight angle. So I'm sorry about that. I'll try and use a different angle next time because I don't think this is ideal. So I hadn't decided what to do with the background, because in the photo, the reference photo that I was using for this portrait, the background is really white, and I used to do a lot of portraits. All of my portraits really were on a really plain white background, but I try not to do that anymore because I find the white of the paper in the background can be a little bit distracting, and it's difficult to make the highlights pop out when the white in the background is so bright. So I was thinking about what to do, because in the background of the photo there are some objects in the background. There are some bottles and I think the side of a table or some sort of surface, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to include objects in the background like I have done in the previous few portraits that I've done. I wanted this to be more simple and for the dog to really pop. So I'm just trying to get as much of the base down as possible so that I can figure out something to do in the background. And I didn't think about it or plan it before I started. I do actually just figure it out as I go. So going back to the idea that I use my iPad to display the reference image, what I do is I open the reference image into Procreate, and that way I can track how long the portrait is taking me, because otherwise I have no idea on drawing time. If you open your image in Procreate, let me just do it now so I can talk you through it. If you click on the little spanner in the top left hand corner, and then you go down to the bottom in the canvas section, and it says canvas information, and then on the left hand side it says canvas info, and then there are some things that you can select. And if you go down to the bottom one, it says statistics, and it says total strokes made and tracked time. So for this one in particular, it says 34 hours and 47 minutes, which is not bad at all. I thought I'd taken a lot longer than that, so 34 hours for this I really don't think is bad at all. So before, I was just kind of guessing how long it was taking me, because my camera, when I'm filming, it has a cut-off point of something like 20 to 23 minutes. But because I film in time-lapse mode, I have these time-lapse collections of clips that are roughly 22 minutes long. So that's if I film for the full extent of 22 minutes. So what I usually do to estimate how long it's taken me, because it's important to know, especially when you're charging, is I usually just add up all of the clips and then times that by 20 just to give myself a rough idea of how long it's taken. But obviously you're not going to only be working in stunts of exactly 20 minutes. You're going to need to go to the bathroom, make yourself a drink, answer the door, etc. So this has been a lot more useful using the statistics in Procreate. Even though I'm not drawing at all in Procreate, it's still a useful thing to have. So I just try and keep the image open on my iPad in Procreate the whole time that I'm drawing, and then turn the screen off every time I get up, but which is not always. I don't always manage to remember to turn it off if I just go to put the kettle on or something, but it's very handy for giving me a rough idea and making sure that I'm charging fairly. When you're doing a portrait for someone and they're paying you, there's extra little bit of extra wanting to please someone in particular, especially for something like this. It's like very sad when you're drawing portraits as commissions, because usually people commission after somebody's passed away or when they get bad news about an illness or something. So you always really want to do the very, very best that you can, which for me means no constraints on my time. I don't mind how long I spend on it. I just want it to be the very best that it can possibly be, which is frustrating for my husband because he always thinks that it's finished before I I deem it finished, but I was really, really happy with it by the end. But I was saying to him yesterday that literally the whole way through, every single drawing that I ever do, I'm going, oh no, why did I do that? Oh God, no, now I need to fix that, and that doesn't look right, and it all comes together at the end. I was listening to this audiobook maybe like a month ago. I can't remember what it was called now, but it were about another lady that moved to Tuscany. She didn't move to Tuscany, but she has a house in Tuscany, and she splits her time between Tuscany and somewhere in America. And she was talking about this hairdresser that she knows, and she said something like, how do you do such beautiful haircuts? And the hairdresser said, oh, I make 1,000 mistakes and then I connect them all. And I thought that was so relevant to how I feel when I'm drawing. I feel like everything that I do is a mistake, and then somehow at the end I manage to connect all the mistakes together, and everything looks good at the end. It's just funny that is so easily relatable depending on lots of different types of careers. So this stage around the muzzle I found probably one of the most difficult, because there are so many different shades and tiny little shapes going in all different directions, and I probably spent the most amount of time here just trying to get all of those little details in. Something that used to really stress me out was drawing whiskers and like trying to leave the gap for whiskers clean, but I don't think about that anymore. I don't do the whiskers until almost at the end, but what I used to do was try and leave the paper clean, but then I would get stressed if there was like any smudging or a little bit of dust from a pencil got on there and discoloured it. But I don't worry about that anymore, because I think really, really white whiskers just don't look natural. They're not really, really white in real life. So that's one less thing to stress about. But all of the points on the muzzle where the whiskers come out from, they're very, very dark on this dog in particular, and there's a lot of different shapes in and around that area, so lots of different directions. The fur is going in different directions and lots of different shades, so I'm always very careful about laying too much dark down too fast, because I'm using a coloured pencil and you can't lift that very easily. And I honestly try not to rub out, like hardly at all. You might have seen I did a little bit of rubbing out because I got a smudge on the right hand side of the background at one point, but I try not to. And if you've got some nice paper, if you're working on a nice paper, it's not that important because your paper can take it. But anytime you use a rubber, especially on paper that doesn't have very much graphite on it, you're taking the top of the paper off sometimes. So I always try and avoid that. And I would say the second most difficult area was the neck. So there was again a lot of different shades in the neck. And as I got to this point, I don't know if it was the angle that I was at or the type of sunshine that was coming through the window. I think you can see now how reflective the graphite is, and I was really struggling to see exactly what I was doing and where I'd laid down a lighter tone of pencil and where I'd laid down a darker tone of pencil. It was difficult because I was getting a lot of glare from the window, so I was having a little bit of a panic here, but everything was fine and I sorted it out. But unfortunately for the camera, you can see a lot of shine at this angle. But something that I don't show is the fixative spray that I use. A fixative spray is something that I've only started using over the past year or so, really loyally. I will not ever go back to not using them. And I think what I was put off by is the smell, because they really stink. The idea is that they fix the graphite down so it doesn't smudge, but keeps you able to rework at the same time. And if you get a nice fixative spray, it's not going to yellow the paper or anything. I remember when I was a lot younger and I was talking to this other girl that draws, she was saying that she sprays hairspray on hers, which is probably okay if you're just at student level on your sketches, but I wouldn't put that onto a professional portrait, something that you're going to sell. What I find is the best thing about fixative sprays is they, similar to to oil paint, if you've ever seen anyone pour varnish on an oil painting after they've finished, after the oil paint's dried, the varnish sort of brings everything back to life, really makes all the colours pop, and all that dimension that the artist has been working on trying to portray in their painting. Everything sort of goes flat when the paint dries, but then you put the varnish on and it just breathes life back into it, and that is what a fixative spray does. And it also has some sort of anti-glare effect on graphite, which is really helpful, but I don't use it as I'm working, I use it as a finish at the end. So you don't see me using it, but you will notice a big difference if you stay to the end and see what the final drawing looks like, because there is no weird reflections anymore after it's been sprayed. And another thing that I have been looking for the longest time is some good masking tape to put around the edge. I've used all sorts of different types of tape, and just this regular masking tape seems to work the best. It's just very handy for protecting the edges and also sticking the portrait down to the table so that it doesn't move. So at this point is when I've decided it's time to do a background. I've got most of the base layers done, like the values are somewhat where they need to be, and in order to really accurate with the details now, I need to figure out what the background is doing. So what I started with was just a little bit of graphite dust on a cotton pad and just working that into the background just on the cotton pad, because I wasn't sure if I wanted just a light background or a dark background, and it's easy to build up, but then I realised when I've just put a light wash on, it wasn't doing enough. And in the original reference image, there is some sort of worktop or table in the background that is moving in this direction of these diagonal lines that I put in. So I thought that direction would be nice to have in the background, because that's what's there in real life, just to ground the image in something. And then I decided that I wanted it to be quite dark with a little bit of a lighter shade on one side of the face. So I was just building up those layers, and this is when it goes through a really ugly stage while I'm just figuring out exactly how I want the background to be. So this was a slightly stressful time, one of those times where you just have to trust the process and believe that it will all look good in the end. It always does. So if you are working on a drawing right now and you're going through the ugly stage, just know that it gets better. So you can see now that even with this very, very rough backgrounding, the whites on the side of the jowls and on the nose, they're really getting your attention now, which was the idea. Also makes it easier for me to see, and having that darker backgrounding gives me a point of reference for all of the other little details that I haven't put in yet. So I did keep the background mostly just going in this diagonal hatching motion, and I do blend a little bit with a tissue and with a cotton pad on the base layers, but later on when I'm working on the final layers, I just use pencil. Oh, it looks rough there. That's okay, it will get better. So now that I've got a rough idea of what I want for the background, and this is practically the second to final stage of the portrait, because everything is where it needs to be, including the background. Now it's just onto the refinement stages. At this stage, I brought in a post-it note, and what I used to do was use a little piece of printer paper, just A4 paper that I'd fold in half, and I'd keep that under my hand so that my hand isn't putting any oils from my hands onto the paper, and my hand isn't also picking up graphite and smudging it around everywhere. But what I found, even though using the paper is a lot better than just having your hand on there, the paper will also pick up graphite a little bit and move it around places. But with the post-it note, because it's got that sticky little strip on it, it doesn't move, so it doesn't smudge anything. I was very happy with that, especially because I'm working on a slanted desk. There would be a lot of movement on just a free piece of paper. Okay, so this part that we're watching right now, this must have been a Friday, because this end of the working day light things always seem to look better after 2 p.m. And this is really getting to the final stage now. So over the weekend, I thought I'm gonna need something to help me pull out the rest of the highlights. So like I was saying to you before about saving space for the whiskers, I'll just use an eraser and chisel out the whiskers. So over the weekend, I ordered a Faber-Castell kneadable eraser just for lifting some of the graphite off if I wanted a softer highlight. And these are handy because you can mold them into any shape that you want, and they come in a little box so you can keep them in there to keep dust off them, because if you don't, then they'll just pick up everything because they're kind of sticky. They feel a lot like blue tack, and I'm wondering if they're made of very similar stuff because it does feel exactly like blue tack. So here you can see this is morning light in my studio. That is a very difficult light to draw by. This is probably around 10 a.m. and the light is so strong in there and the reflections were so strong. So the other eraser that I ordered was, I think it's called a Tombow. It's either mono eraser or micro eraser, and it's kind of like a mechanical pencil. So you push the top and an eraser comes out of the bottom, and it's somewhat of a harder eraser. I think you just saw me using it a little bit there. They're handy to have for things like whiskers and highlights in the eye. Just another couple of tools to have in your kit if you work in charcoal or if you work in graphite. They're really handy. So that was my little weekend art supply haul. I ordered 2 rubbers. And the weekend before is when I ordered the graphite pencil. I can start the week with the new art supplies. But I am working on the background. I've got a certain idea now of exactly what I want the background to look like. So I wanted to create a very soft vignette with a 9B strength graphite pencil in the corners and a little bit along the top edge and the right hand side edge, and then blending that down to a HB, leaving a very soft light around the back of the dog's face just on the right hand side, just to give the background a little bit of depth so that it didn't look completely flat. That's what graphite is really good for, is making things look 3-dimensional. So I wanted to capitalise on that as much as possible. See, at this point I am really struggling to see what I'm doing and see where the transitions are, but I know it'll be fine at the end because I've already finished. That's a nice place to be in retrospect. So at this point in the portrait, I've got the background sort of how I want it to be, and now I'm thinking the foreground, the black, is not strong enough. There's not enough contrast. I abandoned my idea of having this just as a purist pencil portrait, and I bring in this Faber-Castell Pitt pen with a brush tip, and this was so scary at first because the black is so black. So the contrast at first was really strong. It was just another one of those times where you have to trust your own ideas that it's gonna work. So I went in with that, and it wasn't until I was about 3/4 of the way through this layer that I was 100% sure that I'd made the right decision. But I made sure that I was keeping all of the brush strokes really short because this is a very short-haired breed, making sure all the brush strokes were going in the right direction. And this is not the first time that I've brought ink into the final stages of process for a pencil drawing, because you can really amp up the contrast at the end with a change of medium. When I was first starting out and I was starting with graphite pencils and then I went into coloured pencils, I had a very purist approach when it came to art supplies. And if I was doing graphite, then I only wanted to use graphite pencils, and if I was doing colour pencil, then I only wanted to use coloured pencil. I didn't like switching my art supplies up, but as I've gotten older and more experienced and I've started experimenting with different art supplies and different combinations, I have learned that you you can really get some fantastic effects when you combine different mediums. There is no pencil that I know of, especially one that has staying power, because I don't like using charcoal. It's just too messy. But with this pen, it dries super fast. It lays on top of the graphite. Even if the graphite is really smooth and shiny, the pen just sits on top of it perfectly. It doesn't smudge. It's taking like no time at all to dry, and it's sitting on top and drying in a way that's really clear and really obvious. It's just a really good quality brush pen. And throughout this whole thing, the pen never picked up any graphite and got ruined on the tip. It just stayed perfect all the way through this process. I was so happy that I decided to do that, because this is something that I didn't plan. I went into the portrait with the idea of it just being a pencil portrait, kind of back to that purist attitude again. But I was really happy that I changed my mind and had a different idea. So what I'd used before, when I'd added ink into the final stages of a portrait, I used a really fine liner. The usual size was a 0.003. Really fine point, but because this is a little bit bigger than any of those ones that I've used fine liner on, I decided to use the brush pen, and I liked that the strokes weren't as uniform as they would be with a fine liner. So yeah, I was super happy that I invested the extra time to make it better, because it really made everything pop when I did this. The only thing that you have to be careful of is not to be too sparing with it, to really put the ink at least a little bit everywhere, so it creates a nice intentional uniform look across the whole portrait. But yeah, if you've never done that before, I highly recommend bringing a little bit of ink into your graphite or coloured pencil portraits, because I love the effect. So something you don't see very much, because on the last day I didn't film anything, and we're getting to the last day now, is the transitions between the very dark ink and the graphite. So I used a luminance pencil in black, and that is more of a cool tone, and it's a wax based pencil. And then I also used a polychromos pencil, which is an oil based pencil, and that is the black colour. It's more of a warm shade. So using those two together, I was able to really blend the black ink into the rest of the graphite in a way that looked really natural and really soft. So that is the end of the portrait. All I have to do now is take off the masking tape, which was really easy and really stress-free, because this masking tape is fantastic and it's just regular masking tape. I just order it from Amazon. Then I signed it, and for that I did use a fine liner, I think a 0.2 fine liner. It was part of the same set, the Faber-Castell ones, and I decided to sign it on the dog shoulder, just a really small, really subtle little signature with the year on it, and that was it. So it is now sat in my studio waiting to be posted, which I will do next week. But for now, I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and I hope you like the portrait, and I'll hopefully see you again soon with another one. Thank you for watching. Bye.